Respected Admiral Hari Kumar, Admiral Dhawan, Admiral Karambir Singh, Gurumurthy ji, Vice Admiral Chauhan, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of my brother Ashok and the Nayyar family, we are delighted to have you join us for the third annual Vice Admiral K.K. Nayyar lecture. We would like to thank the Indian Navy for its support and the NMF for conducting this lecture every year. This year, as has been mentioned, the lecture is special. It brings together the two organizations my father was the founding chairman of. These organizations truly represented what my father was passionate about and his work. My father's first love was India. It was his dream to see India achieve a preeminent global position, a direction we are now moving towards. His second love was the Indian Navy, and he firmly believed that for India to be recognized as a global leader, it was important to become a maritime power. In order to achieve these goals, in his view, there was a significant role for independent organizations, think tanks supported by quality research focused on nation building, and long-term strategic thinking on key issues. He embedded his belief in his work and was a proud chairman of both these organizations, which are continuing to successfully focus on excellent work for the nation. Ashok and I are particularly delighted that Gurumurthy ji is the speaker today. My father knew Gurumurthy ji well, and they worked together as well and have many similarities. Both of them committed nationalists, proud of their culture, religion, and tradition. This, even at a time when it was not quite the fashion, and sometimes there was a price to be paid, which they did with an equanimity, as they were very firmly committed to their cause. They also shared a unique trait of always being on a continuous path of discovery and learning at any age or stage of their life. My father held Gurumurthy ji in the highest esteem. It was not just for his incredible intellect or list of significant academic or professional achievements. It was largely for his selfless work and commitment to the nation. I recall my father telling me that Gurumurthy ji never wanted any position. And while it is unique to meet an individual who shuns power and position, what is even more unique in the world of PR and publicity is to find an individual who is focused only on his cause with no desire for personal gain or recognition. And for that, there was a similarity between my father and Gurumurthy ji. Both of them embody the work of a Karambir and the philosophy of Karam kiye ja aur phal ki ichha na kar. My father measured the success of an individual by what they achieved for the country. And by that yardstick, I don't think there is a need for a title or a position to declare Gurumurthy ji as one of the most successful individuals that my father believed in. As a nation, we would be stronger, richer on many counts, prouder of our culture, and would have achieved even greater heights if we had more committed citizens like them. And for that reason, we are particularly honored and delighted to have Gurumurthy ji as our speaker for the Vice Admiral K.K. Nayyar lecture today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now it is with great anticipation that we await the highlight of today's program. We are privileged to have Sri Swaminathan Gurumurthy, Chairman of the Vivekananda International Foundation, who will shed light on the theme Rise of Civilizational Consciousness and Civilizational Nationalism. May I now request, sir, to take the floor and enlighten us all.
Admiral R. Hari Kumar, Chief of the Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, who set very high standards both in terms of delivery, language, phonetics, which is very difficult to excel. And I don't certainly hope to excel the phonetic part of it. Maybe the idiom and grammar part of it I can. Admiral Karambir Singh and Ashok Nayyar and Geeta Nayyar, who are diligently pursuing the perpetuation of the memory and the things and the thoughts and the work for which Nayyar stood. I must say it's an important, many people inherit many things from the parents, but this what they have inherited is something for the good of the society and the country. See, today's topic is, as I said, quite provocative, but I was trying to tell them it can be equally contemplative also. But before I go into the topic, I must also try and explain what is my relationship with Mr. Nayyar, which makes me stand before you. I have no other credential, perhaps, to match him and to be part of a lecture before this august audience. My credentials are that I started as his junior colleague in Vivekananda International Foundation, which was established by Mr. Ajit Doval and Mr. Nayyar for a different purpose. It was not one of those think tanks that they wanted to establish in Delhi. There are many. And it was established with a purpose, with a goal, with an ideal, with a drive, which you will not see in any other think tank. One of the first things we decided to put in the trust deed of the Vivekananda International Foundation is that it will not accept any foreign donation. To give a basic Bharatiya trust to the very philosophy, functioning, and those who man the institution. We thought that this was an essential and the most difficult thing to put at a time when everybody was looking everywhere outside India, not only for ideas, but also for money. We could do it because we felt it was a national necessity and this nation had a global responsibility. It's not that this has been a nation which has been exclusive to itself. It had been from the beginning, for thousands of years. It only thought of the world and the good of the world. And we don't often remember that this civilization had an orientation which was denied to all other civilizations. And that is why it has a durability which is also denied to all other civilizations. As Swami Vivekananda said, if you want to look at the Greco-Roman, Egyptian civilization, you have to look at the broken monuments. But here you can see some continuity somewhere, about which I will relate to what the Encyclopedia Britannica says. So the kind of intense public discourse, public education, and the normal understanding of the country that must have taken place post-independence hasn't taken place. It's a very unfortunate failure of both leadership as well as the continuity of the colonial model which we had adopted and inherited. So Admiral Nayyar has been, in a way, my teacher. This is teacher-student relationship. And I was a newcomer to the strategic field. I had the urge. I had a missionary zeal. But that is not adequate to be part of a strategic group which relates to the world, which relates to everything in India and outside. But they shaped me. Actually, Admiral Nayyar and Ajit Doval shaped me. And I cannot forget the way they initiated me, they groomed me, they made me study, they made me look at things, they made me part of them. And that's why I am before you. Otherwise, I have no qualification to stand before you. I started off as a chartered accountant, then became a journalist, then became a political activist. And of course, I had a role in economics also. But in none of these things, I had any kind of specialization. In fact, one of the things I would like to emphasize before people who think in silo pattern, in domain pattern, is that super specialization has limited the pursuit of knowledge. There is no comprehensive helicopter view linking different domains. And everybody is a specialist and nobody is a leader. And you have to accept a specialist as a leader, which the other specialization doesn't want to do. So we need to have it. This is because basically Americanization of knowledge. In fact, Mr. Balbir Punji is sitting here. I was delivering a lecture before Niti Ayog. When she was sitting before me that day, he told that he took his wife to a doctor, eye surgeon. And he said there are 8 specialization in eye treatment. Can you believe this? And each person who specializes considers himself the expert, and none of them will accept the other as the comprehensive eye specialist. This happens even in maritime field. It happens within the army, within the government, in the field of economics, in the field of sociology, anthropology. I find this super specialization is placing a huge limitation on the knowledge gathering, pursuit of knowledge, understanding of human life. It is all fit into silos. This is one of the objections which I am going to raise in the course of my speech. I owe this lecture, this very topic and its content, to Mr. Nayyar. Most people do not know he was a civilizational nationalist. That is what drove him. That is what made him part of the Vivekananda International Foundation. He had any amount of think tanks inviting him to lead. But he put particular attention. He took particular interest in Vivekananda International Foundation because it was the think tank of his dream. He used to tell me which think tank will have the guts to say that they won't receive foreign money when people were queuing up to give. And there were many. And when they said, there was within couple of years of establishing as a think tank, when this think tank was established, it was inaugurated by Mata Amritanandamayi. This shook Delhi. This is Indian civilization. Indian civilization is not army, it is not generals, it's something much higher. So we wanted to emphasize that point. And from that time onwards, you will be surprised to know, Sajid Dole used to say it with pride, that 3 army chiefs in uniform came and attended programs in Vivekananda International Foundation before 2014. Perhaps you know the significance of the date I mentioned. And more, he used to tell me that we have given no first use offer to Pakistan about a nuclear attack. We will not attack first. If Pakistan attacked, what would be the collateral damage to India? The task was given to Vivekananda International Foundation. You know why? Because we did not accept money from abroad. This is important for a country. That is Atmanirbharata. Atmanirbharata cannot be achieved if you are looking for a donation and issuing receipts to some foreign think tank. Many came. In fact, when we organized programs, they will be the first one to say, we are willing to sponsor this. Somebody offered, I think, 5 crore donation. I said, we are not takers. Understand, this is Admiral Nayyar. So, his high credentials as a maritime leader and a specialist, I need not have to go into because all of you know much more than me. But he was a highly respected strategic thinker. In fact, he was a leader of the strategic community. One of the qualities which made me feel more attracted to him, he says, I am also a man of strong views. He was also a man of strong views. But he knew how to deal with people of other views who had held strong views and still win their respect. This is possible only for tall people. It's not possible for a tall specialist. A tall man is able to get the attention of the people without being adversarial. That quality is something which I am still trying to inherit, but I cannot say I have succeeded in it. He was a sought after leader of a strategic community, but I tell you, he had not only special love, and he felt that the Vivekananda International Foundation was his chosen domain, implementing the civilizational dimensions of Indian strategic thinking, Indian culture, Indian statehood, the purpose of India in the context of the world. You see, there is nothing that the Indian thinkers expounded which is unconnected to the world. Everything was rooted in the overall interest of Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Let noble thought come to us from all sides. Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu. You don't, these were all not yesterday's. It's not modern thoughts. These were all thousands of years back and into our DNA. And the consequence of it, I am going to tell you, in a world which has nothing to do with these ideas, which is adversarial to all these ideas, hostile to all these ideas. How are we going to deal with this world? That is the civilizational challenge India has been facing, failing, succeeding, escaping. These are all the things I would like to bring to your notice. And the civilizational nationalism of India, which is the core of the Vivekananda International Foundation, was the thing that bound and bound Admiral Nayyar and me. Of course, about his contribution, how he founded this National Maritime Foundation and all that, I need not have to say. It was very well dealt with. Some of them so new to me. Of course, many things are new to me. This is also new to me. Today's topic, rising civilizational consciousness and civilizational nationalism. As I said, it's not an abstract subject, which I will go into and explain further and try to convince you. It is equally concrete and contemplative. And more important, it has close nexus with the idea of national strategic narrative. I am not talking about national strategic security strategy. There is a difference between national security strategy and national security narrative. National strategic narrative is a concept which is evolving for the last decade or so, and I have not heard it in the Indian discourse. That is why I chose this topic, that there is a link between civilizational consciousness and civilizational nationalism of India and national strategic narrative, which I will try and explain. Before that, I have to give it's not that we are talking about geography of 2.4% of the total land area of the world and 18% of world's population. We are talking about much more larger connect for us. So I would like to begin with where the world stands today and where it stood and where it is moving in the context of the happenings today. I'm not getting into specific likes Ukraine or whatever. I would like to give a general perspective about how different people who have handled the world, shaped the world, are talking about the world. Post-World War and Cold War order is in ICU today. I don't think anyone has any doubt about it. What we thought was permanent, globalization permanent, the Western domination permanent, all this has been shaken in the last 2 decades. And it has happened before our very eyes. Newspapers are bringing it out. Headlines are proving it. So, the man who shaped the post-Cold War, World War and Cold War order, Henry Kissinger, said the world order will change forever. This was his first comment after the COVID pandemic. After the Ukraine war, he said, unless we do something immediately, the world order will get restructured forever. All this has no meaning. The only thing is the present order is not going to last. What it will be, what shape it will take. Order means a leader. There is not going to be any leader. According to the European Union Farsight Studies Institute, by 2030, there will be no hegemonic world power at all. Middle powers are rising. Their own power, their own position, their own geographies, their own assets, their own competence are enabling them to play a role which was denied to them. What that will do to the world is a different thing. Middle powers are rising. And India's emergence as a strategic power and a geopolitical influencer has been phenomenal in the last decade. Of course, it has been rising since we decided to play the global game. Indians never knew the will to power. We all thought to keep the power is the most difficult thing to do. Yes, it is. But in a world of power, you have to play the power game. I don't know how many of you recalled that when we exploded the Pokhran atom bomb, what Bill Clinton said, I very well remember. I read it in the newspaper at that time. It is as clear as I am seeing this boat to be. He said, a land of Buddha and Gandhi has done this. We were always a land of Buddha and Gandhi. How did you treat us? The world never treated India with respect till India exploded the Pokhran atom bomb. It cost us. In fact, I was part of the discussions of government at that time. The entire finance ministry officials said this government has ruined India. Not an easy decision to take. Strategically, the turning point, the West got the announcement that they have changed India. And from the time onwards, you are seeing how they are engaging India. They engaged India because of the atom bomb in their hands. If China did not have atom bomb in 1965, with the kind of poverty and hunger in which they were steeped in, with 30 million Chinese dying in between 1957 and 1960, the news of which came out only in 1978. Why did they engage China? It's because it had power in its hands. It's a world of power, the will to power. India learned quite late. Why? There was always a civilizational conflict in India between having power and how to use it, handle it properly. This Dharam Sankat has been agitating India not today, from the time of Kautilya. I will go to it later. I want to highlight why it is important for us to understand the rise of civilizational consciousness all over the world and what is Indian civilizational nationalism in the context of what the world is today. And in this, one thing is definite, which most of the strategic thinkers with whom I move agree, that the world today is not going to be the linear extension of today to tomorrow. A very different world is emerging. The most important shift is from a free world, we are moving into a world of deep fakes. You can understand the kind of confusion, chaos. In fact, the man who found the artificial intelligence, he says, I have found something, it is going to, we don't know what it is going to do to the world. And you have to run governments, you have to manage public opinion. We don't know whether the picture that is appearing in as what you are doing is true. You may be seen as shaking hands with Dawood Ibrahim. It may be published in the newspaper. And it will be believed, at least for the first 2 days. And you will be only defending for the next 4 days. You are not that person. This is the danger to which nations are being exposed. People are being exposed. System is being exposed. We have to find answers for all this. It cannot be technological. This calls for a national strategic narrative. And this is what two State Department officials, without putting their name, wrote a paper in 2011, and that was carried by the Wilson Center. And I am going to quote from that report. There are two situations in which they were thinking it is necessary for America. One, there is declinism taking place in American power. After 2008, as someone who has intense understanding and pursuit of economics, American power has eroded enormously. It is not as much as understood as it is perceived. Everybody perceives it, but nobody says. Because if you say that, what little survives as faith in the subject of economics will collapse. So we have to keep that subject of economics surviving. I'm not going to get into greater detail than this, but you must understand it is not economic crisis, it is economics in crisis. But still we are looking at the same book. So there is a huge problem. And where it will lead to, at what point another collapse like this taking place, where the world will be, the financial system will be, the center of gravity will be, we don't know. So they write, this is the Anne Mary Slaughter, Director of Policy Planning, US Department of State. She has written a covering note for that paper. It was written the name of one Mr. Y. She writes, United States needs a national strategic narrative. We have a national security strategy which sets forth 4 core national interests and outlines a number of dimensions of an overarching strategy to advance those interests in the 20th century. The next sentence is very important. But this document is written by specialists for specialists. It doesn't answer the fundamental question that more and more Americans are asking. What is the United States going in the world? Where is the United States going in the world? How can we get there? Etc. The next sentence is very, very important and connects me to the topic. We need a story. Note the word, a story. With a beginning, middle, and projected happy ending that will transcend our political divisions, orient us as a nation, give us both common direction and confidence and commitment to get to our destination. All these are as abstract as my topic today. A narrative is a story. A national strategic narrative must be a story that Americans can understand and identify within their own lives. A national story has always been the most important part, is what I am going to read to you about the American Dharam Sankat. America's national stories has always seesawed between exceptionalism and universalism. We have exactly the same problem, which I will relate to you. The exceptionalism about America is that we are a free nation, we are this, we are individual rights, human rights, gender rights, this, free market, liberal democracy. These are all the exceptionalism of America. But the universalism of America doesn't reflect any of these things. They identify with all rogue nations. They support all rogue nations. They harm all rogue nations. Paper says so. It says there is a contradiction between your universalism and exceptionalism. We have to align it. You can no more show your gun and control the world, and the world of information which you are facing is a different world. This is what that paper says. But the important point is that you need a narrative to unify the American mind. Present America to the world, that this is America. You know, this happened in 1980 when Joseph Nye, he innovated the idea of soft power and said America should not be branded by warships. It should be branded by Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Mickey Mouse. I mean, these are very, very, what I can say, very ordinary way of presenting, but that is how America became a power. By selling Coca-Cola, it conquered the world. By presenting Mickey Mouse, it bamboozled the world. But these are not going to be a long-term project. It could work for 1 month, 2 months, 1 decade, 2 decades. At least he proposed an alternative to the rogue stature of America. Now, here the proposal is that you have to live by your own profession as this. Can you do it? That was the challenge before America. And the challenge continues even today between exceptionalism and universalism. We do not want to be the sole superpower that billions of people around the world have learned to hate from fear for our military might. We seek instead to be the nation that other nations listen to, rely on, and emulate out of respect and admiration. The substance I want to present before you, that the topic I have taken is that a national strategic narrative for India is needed. But what can be that narrative? As I said, the national strategic narrative is different from national security strategy, which is more systematic. It's policy oriented. But national strategic narrative is something much larger. There is philosophy in it. There is lifestyle in it. There is a relationship in it. And there is a restraint in it. These are all the things which we have to factor in when we are talking about the civilizational nationalism in India. And we can talk about it. We could not talk about it maybe 2 decades before. Why? Because civilizational consciousness was kept suppressed by 2 ruling ideologies of the world. Both the free market as well as communism, both hated civilization. You know what happened in China in 1965? They wanted to wipe out the remnants of everything of the past, and they carried on a war against it. Every book, every statue, every temple, every memorial was put out. But from that China, which hated its past, which hated Confucius, it burnt his books, it threw his pictures. From that communist China, a Confucian China is emerging today. This happened as at the turn of the 20th century. And today, Xi Jinping addressing the centenary of the communist movement, he said we have a 5,000-year civilization which will guide us not only now, forever. Right? Where did you find this civilization? Because the DNA of China is basically Confucian. It is not communist. This could not be suppressed. In fact, Admiral Nayyar told me something stunning. When we were discussing China, he said the man who first saw the rise of Confucian China, you will be surprised, Mr. Gurumurthy, it is the RSS chief M.S. Golwalkar. In 1972, a question was put to him. What do you think will be China? In one sentence, it is there in his book. A Confucian China will emerge out of the communist China with its empire building instincts intact. This is the power of civilization. Civilization is DNA. It is inherent in our conduct, in our thought, in our attitudes, in our relationships. You may suppress it, as we suppressed for 70 years. So when it comes, see, elsewhere it may come as something like a volcano, as a revolution. In India, India will never have a revolution. In fact, 1990s, I used to discuss with many economists why India did not become communist. And it had so much poverty, 70% poverty, this, that, and the other. So I used to tell them, in India, 75% of the people are self-employed. The self-employed is his own worker and his own master. Where will he find the place for proletarian movement? That is what we regard as Atmanirbharta. Even today, more than 2/3 of Indians are entrepreneurs. This is proven by the economic survey, which is taken every 10 years. I'm not talking about the annual economic survey. We just put it out. So we have a very different society. We have a very different mind. We have a very different philosophy. We have also an exceptionalism. We have also universalism. Our exceptionalism and universalism are one and the same. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. This is our exceptionalism. But this is our universalism also. We don't practice something outside which we don't practice inside. The contradiction is in America. Their exceptionalism conflicts with their universalism. But our exceptionalism and universalism are aligned. They have problem because of the conflict. We have problem because both are one and the same. Because we treat even our enemies. We have, they say about 1 million people who have intruded into India. It is because Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, Atithi Devo Bhava. You don't ignore anybody, everybody. Very noble thoughts. But clearly contradicts the idea of national security today. It is not that these national security issues have come because of politics, because of political parties. It has come because of our own civilizational upbringing. So this narrative, how important it is, I have to emphasize where we have set the world, where the world was and where we were set in it, and where that world has moved and where we are going to be set in it is important. You know, many people have not read. In those days, when United Nations was considered to be a very strong body, today it is nothing. It is a debating club. In 1951, the United Nations, it gathered all the experts and came out with measures for the development of underdeveloped countries, which was mandated to all the countries of the world, which was purely based on the Western understanding of themselves, and they wanted to shape the world according to that understanding. That is called anthropology of modernity. Of course, those who are students of anthropology will understand what I'm saying. What it says is important. There is a sense in which rapid economic progress is impossible without painful readjustments. Ancient philosophies have to be scrapped. Old social institutions have to disintegrate. Bonds of caste, creed, and race have to burst. And large number of persons who cannot keep up with progress have to have the expectations of comfortable life frustrated. Very few communities are willing to pay this price. This was the basis on which our education system, our policies, our planning commission, our public discourse, our media began saying, unless you cease to be what you are, you can never develop. This was our education. You can never develop so long as what you are, and you continue to be. This was the one-size-fits-all model into which they tramped the world, and it became more pronounced and even more voluntarily accepted when globalization came. This was the Western model, what they call as the liberal world order. I'm not criticizing any of these things. I'm only commenting. My tone may look criticism, but what I am presenting is purely facts. So, when this is called the one-size-fits-all model, which became more voluntarily accepted because the competitor had disappeared. Lester Thoreau wrote in 1990 in his book Head to Head, He said the problem of capitalism is that it needed a competitor for its efficiency. The competitor had disappeared, so its efficiency will disappear. This is true of not only economics, this is true of politics also, because they did not have competitor. They thought they could ram through the world. They began expanding NATO. They began this. You see the consequences that is happening today. So, this one-size-fits-all model made them declare arrogantly that the West has won against the rest forever. It is best for the rest to follow the West. This is what Francis Fukuyama wrote in his book, The End of History and the Lost Man. He said all conflicts have ended. You can close down the history departments today. The West has won. I mean, how foolish, to put in a common man's language, and how unwise it is, to put in your language, for someone to say that all conflicts have disappeared. Huntington came out to this protest. Gentlemen, I think you are. And the way he summarized the whole thing in his paper, how this reality was being suppressed and something was being projected to mislead the world. He said he just take how the Olympics was decided to be held in Australia, not in Beijing. All the Christian nations voted for Australia. All the non-Christian nations voted for China. See, this is the world. You understand it. It's not policy. There is a civilizational drive. Don't forget it. He was abused. All the liberals pounced on him. But 9/11 attack took place. Huntington came alive. Liberalism is at best elitism. It doesn't go, that is what that National Strategic Narrative paper says, that it is a policy of experts for experts. It is not policy for the ordinary people. Ordinary people live their own life. They are not educated in Harvard. They are not educated in big institutions. They don't deliver good speeches in English. But they live their life. And they are 99.999% of the world. It's true of America also. That is why they say we want a narrative which the ordinary American will understand. The ordinary American is the real American. And not think tanks. The think tanks have to deal with, understand, expound, express the ordinary man. This is the function of the think tank. This top-down knowledge making, the specialization, this has killed the entire process of knowledge creation as well as knowledge distribution. The civilizational consciousness of India rose in the 21st century so fast, so powerfully. As I said, the communist China began declaring itself as Confucian China. And parallelly, there has been a rise of civilizational consciousness in India also, like of which, in a democracy, in a peaceful manner, shift of the mind, that we have to move, we have to look at the past for our inspiration is something which we have now undeniably begun accepting. Previously, it was not so. Anything of the past is wrong. When I was speaking to some scholars of history, they used to say, I mean, this is not something out of the way, but something very relevant I have to say here. But how the super specialization has killed the pursuit of knowledge. Vedas were regarded as imaginary because the river Saraswati mentioned there did not exist. So if they mentioned a river that did not exist, the people who spoke about it were only imagining. But now, there is a huge scientific data which proves that river Saraswati indeed was flowing. And now the water has been located in different places. The same water as in Himalayas is going right up to Ran of Kutch. And satellite imagery has shown that there has been a shift of water into Sutlej and Yamuna. And that is how Saraswati dried up. That means Saraswati was real. And so those who wrote in the Vedas about Saraswati, they were talking about something real. They were not poets. They were not imaginary. Next most important evidence I'll tell you. 7 Nobel laureates have said the answers to the questions raised by the quantum mechanics you can find only in Vedas and Upanishads. So Vedas and Upanishads were not poems. There was scientific knowledge in it. The scientists say so. So ask the historians, have we ever factored these 2 facts into the history of India, the origin of India? An Indus Valley civilization. How continuous it is. It is not taught anywhere. It is Dravidian. It is Anaryan. It has nothing to do with the Vedic civilization. Actually, Airavatam Mahadevan, who is perhaps the greatest epigraphist, I had worked with him. In fact, in 1978, when he was looking at the Rigveda and the Indus Valley seals, he said, Guru, I am shocked that the Rigveda description of the Somapana Yajna is in Indus Valley seals. And he wrote a paper in 1983. He was abused for that. But now the whole world accepts that there is a connect between Indus Valley civilization and Vedic civilization. Now, this is what the Encyclopedia Britannica says about Indus Valley civilization and its continuity till today. It's not me. In India, if such a thing is taught, they will give a color to this particular text. While the Indus or Harappan civilization may be considered the culmination of a long process indigenous to Indus Valley. This is important because many people relate it to Babylonian and Egyptian civilization. But this author is an Australian. He's a leftist writer. He says, indigenous to Indus Valley, a number of parallels exist between the developments on the Indus River and the rise of civilization in Mesopotamia. Isn't there a parallel? It is striking to compare Indus with this better known and more fully documented region and to see how closely the two coincide with respect to the emergence of cities and of such major concomitants of civilization as writing, standardized weights, measures, and monumental architecture. Yet nearly all the earlier writers have sensed the Indianness of this civilization, and even when they were largely unable to articulate it. Historian V. Gordon Childe is an Australian. He is regarded as a leftist. He says, India confronts Egypt and Babylonia by the 3rd millennium with a thoroughly individual and independent civilization of her own, technically the peer of the rest. And plainly, it is deeply rooted in the Indian soil. Indus civilization represents a very perfect adjustment of human life to a specific environment. And it has endured, and it is already specifically Indian and forms the base of the modern Indian culture. New Light on Most Asian East, 4th edition, 1952. It has still not got into your textbooks. The force of Childe's words, this is from Encyclopedia Britannica. The force of Childe's words can be appreciated even without examination of Indus Valley script found on the seals. The attention paid to the domestic bathrooms, the drains, the great bath at Mohenjo-daro, which is regarded as that is the starting point of the Kumbh Mela, according to many. Paid to the great bath at Mohenjo-daro can be compared to the elements of later Indian civilization. The bullock carts with framed canopy, called rikas, the boats, are little changed even to this day. The absence of pin and love of bangles and of elaborate nose ornaments are peculiarly South Asian. The religion of Indus is also replete with suggestions of traits known from later India. The significance of the bull, the tiger, the elephant, the composite animals, the seated yogi or the seal, yogi god of the seals, tree spirits, and the objects resembling Shiva of later times. These are all suggesting enduring forms of later Indian civilization. this continuity doesn't exist anywhere. And till today, it is continuous. And it is not only continuous in terms of external appearances, there is continuity in terms of internalized thoughts. That is what we suffer from. And we are a non-conflicting civilization. That is, every civilization has a conflicting element. In fact, every civilization means conflict. India is the only civilization, our civilization, did not have an adversarial enemy. We did not have a theological enemy. We had nobody to fight. In fact, I think the army must introduce this particular book for everybody. The Hindu Rules of War by V.R. Ramchandra Dikshit. It's one of the finest books written. It has been forgotten. It has been discovered through internet and it is available. And it says in the Vedas, if somebody dropped the weapon in the battlefield, is a non-combatant. Anyone injured is a patient. Anyone who is not in the battlefield is a non-combatant. Tell me, the West realized it only in 1897 at The Hague. The distinction between combatants and non-combatants. And this continued. In Mahabharata, we are told that the Pandavas and Kauravas used to have a drink. After the war was over, the next day they began fighting with each other. Is it possible? In the 17th century, in the history of Kerala by Padmanabha Menon, he quotes Whiteway, who wrote on how the Portuguese and the Zamori kings fought. The Zamori king writes a letter to the Portuguese. Gentlemen, we don't know how you wage wars. We wage wars like this. We beat the drum in the morning, say we are ready for war, but we won't attack you till you also. In the evening, if you beat the drum, even if you are waging the war, we will stop. Because we stop the war when the enemy is not prepared for the war. We will not attack you without. And he said, no, the people are there. Agricultural operations are going there. There is a huge playground there. On both sides, there is water. You perch our army on one side. We perch our army on the other side. And the Portuguese is asking for war or sports. And the Zamori king's war model is described by Whiteway that the two kings will be fighting, but the army will be perched together. They will be exchanging their rations. They will be talking to each other. At the beat of the drum, they will separate and begin hitting each other. This is the continuance of the DNA. The book is called The History of Kerala by Padmanabha Menon. These are all the things which stood against us. Our entire strategic culture collapsed. On the 30th March 2013, The Economist magazine wrote, does India have a strategic culture? We had a strategic culture, but that strategic culture was destroyed. With that, I will now almost come to the last part of my speech. This information I got not in the Government of India website, not in any textbooks. You will be amazed, I got it from the Pakistan government's website, what I'm going to tell you. This is in the History and Culture of Pakistan by Hamid. One more name is there, I'm missing it. Mr. Dole knows that name, he is his friend. They write about the history and culture of Pakistan, you must read it. In that, the only claim that Pakistan makes as the contribution of Islam is the architecture and food, nothing else. Even the national dress of Pakistan was of the Kushana period. They say so. They said our forefathers were Takshaka, the snake king. Pakistan government website. Takshashila University was the greatest university. World over, people used to come and get educated there. Chandragupta Maurya got educated there. Ashoka got educated there. And you know who was the teacher? The teacher was Kautilya, the most famous exponent of strategic thinking at that time. And the important point that the Pakistan government website makes is the interaction between Kautilya and Alexander. Kautilya asked Alexander, how are you waging wars like this? We are not used to this war. We don't just wage a war because you have an army. You have to give notice to the other side. And the other side they may not wage a war. That is why V.R. Ramchandra Dishadhar declared Ashoka's Kalinga war was an adharmic war. It was without notice. On a smaller kingdom, he crushed it and killed 100,000 people. This is the Indian model. So Alexander said, who are you to ask? We will do whatever we want. This was something new for India, for Kautilya, for our civilization. So Kautilya ran so fast. Alexander ordered his arrest. He came, quietly sat in the forest and said, we have a very different enemy, very different idea, very different world. And that is how he wrote the Arthashastra. We need a state, we need a standing army, we need resources for that. And he shifted the strategic thinking of India that you must win a virtuous war, dharmic war. Even if you have a war, if you win, you must make the defeated king again. This was the kind of noble ideas. But Kautilya said, don't do that. If you win a war, you acquire the territory, build your empire. That is why India could build empire till Kushanas, till the 9th century. In the 4th century, this is where the strategic thinking of India failed. One Banabhatta wrote a book in which he said this Kautilya is an adharmi. He preaches adharma. You know what is the result? The entire Arthashastra books all over India were burnt. Only one copy survived in Tanjore. That was handed over to Mysore Maharaja Library in 1909. Translated into English in 1913. That is what we call as Arthashastra today. The Indian mind was always against war, against any kind of bloodshed. This is revealed by the fact that Professor Ramal, who studied the massive killings that took place all over the world for 2,500 years, he said 1.2 billion people were killed in human action against humans. And he said that till the 13th century, there was no mass killing in India except Emperor Ashoka's war in Kalinga. How is it that in the world, 1.2 billion people he has listed where, how the wars took place, killings took place. One geography which was absent was India. Why? Because we practiced our universalist values, exceptional values, without differentiating. That is why we invited this kind of invasions, and the man who countered it was Chhatrapati Shivaji. He changed the rules of war to suit the enemy's strategy. You know how he produced the results. So the Indian strategic thinking has to be studied in the historical perspective of how our exceptionalism has to be aligned to the global universalism and not your universalism. And we need to factor in the enemy. Adversary taught us how to shape our state attitudes. That is what Kautilya wrote, which was destroyed by Banabhatta and was reinstated by Shivaji. This entire public discourse is missing these very important links and elements in the Indian civilizational rise. We have to bring all this, and when we talk about civilizational nationalism, we must focus on how our exceptionalism, being treated as our universalism outside, has brought enormous national security risk for us, and we have to refashion without losing the essence of our exceptionalism, how we bring national security narrative, how a national security narrative in India has to link with the idea of Indian civilizational consciousness, Indian civilizational nationalism is for all of us to work out. Thank you very much.